Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror anthology movie review series as part of my current March 2024 series, where I'll be taking a look and reviewing 10 different horror anthologies from my collection, mostly that I haven't seen before, including the one in the title, which I mentioned in my intro video to this series. You'd be shocked that I hadn't seen this movie before. And I really hadn't, not up until preparing for this series. And that, of course, is the original from 1982, Creepshow by George A. Romero and Stephen King that I have on DVD here. Now, first thing I'll say is this is a pretty standard DVD that has the movie and not really much else. It doesn't have any artwork on the DVD. As far as special features, it's really just a theatrical trailer and subtitles. So yeah, that's what I've had in my collection probably for. I've probably had this in my collection for about 3 years and haven't watched it yet until now. So anyway, yeah, let's just go ahead and get into the original Creep Show from 1982. Of course, it is one of the most well known and talked about horror anthology movies across the board. So that's why it's probably surprising to most people that I hadn't seen it up until now. So Creepshow is a 1982 American horror comedy anthology film directed by George A. Romero and written by Stephen King, making this film his screenwriting debut. This film's ensemble cast includes Hal Holbrook, Adrian Barbeau, Fritz Weaver, Leslie Nielsen, Carrie Nye, and E.G. Marshall, and Vivica Lanesford, as well as Stephen King himself. The film was primarily shot on location in Pittsburgh and its suburbs, including Monroeville, where Romero leased an old boys academy, Penn Hall, to build extensive sets for the film. Creepshow is an homage to the horror comics of the 1950s, such as Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, and The Haunt of Fear. In order for the film to give its viewers a comic book feel Romero hired longtime effects specialist Tom Savini to replicate comic-like effects. So yeah, so that's kind of the introduction or the premise here. As far as the movie itself, the stories, it starts with a prologue where a young boy named Billy Hopkins gets disciplined by his abusive father Stan, who's of course played by what's his toes? Oh boy, um, Tom Atkins. Oh my God, that would be bad. Tom Atkins plays his father's abusive father, Stan, for reading the comic book Creepshow, a horror comic. Not wanting his son to be exposed to the comic's content, Stan throws it in the garbage. As Billy sits upstairs wishing that his father rots in hell, he hears a sound at the window, and it ends up being fill in the blank. I'm not going to give that away, but if you know the Creepshow franchise, you could probably guess. And then the five segments, which I'm not going to go into too much detail on each one of them, but they're titled Father's Day, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, Something to Tide You Over, The Crate, and They're Creeping Up on You. So Father's Day is basically about a family, kind of a rich family, whose patriarch, you might say, the father, the grandfather, kind of stole and swindled for his money, and he's kind of abusive emotionally to his daughter, and she ends up offing him, and let's just say he comes back for revenge. So a simple plot there. And then the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill. That's the one that has Stephen King in it, and the famous quote "meteor shit." This is probably the most comedic of all five of the stories. Basically, this asteroid thing comes down from Earth, and he touches it, and he ends up uh, changing. We'll say metamorphosizing. Then something to tide you over is the one with Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson, where Ted Danson gets buried in the sands. Um, Basically, Leslie Nielsen's character is trying to get revenge on an affair that takes place with his wife, and it kind of goes from there. The Crate is probably the longest of the five stories. This is the one that has Hal Holbrook, um, Fritz Weaver, and Adrian Barbeau, having to do with this crate that shows up at this college or campus university, and it has a surprise in store for those that try to open it, basically. And then they're creeping up on you is the one with E.G. Marshall, having to do with a lot of cockroaches in his like apartment. Not apartment, but it's like he stays in a very clean. He's kind of a germaphobe, so he stays in this. He's a rich guy, like a mogul, a business mogul, and he stays in this very well kept. sanctuary apartment almost. So those are the five stories, and then it finishes off with an epilogue where we visit Billy again and his father Stan. Um, so basically, the two garbage collectors find the Creepshow comic book that was thrown out on the curb in this epilogue. They look at the ads in the book for X-ray specs and Charles Atlas bodybuilding course. They also see the advertisement for a voodoo doll that they briefly glimpsed earlier, but lament that the order form has already been redeemed. Well, you can probably guess who it's been redeemed by. That plays into the characters that we were introduced to at the beginning in the prologue. So those are the five stories. As far as the cast goes, we have Tom Atkins, Ed Harris, Stephen King, Leslie Nielsen, Ted Danson, Hal Holbrook, Adrian Barbeau, Fritz Weaver, and E.G. Marshall. I keep wanting to say E.J. Marshall. E.G. Marshall. Probably most notably for me from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, as he plays Art. But yeah, that's to set up the premise, the stories, and the cast for Creepshow from 1982. Um, this is a great horror anthology. I mean, it's one of those things where you hold on to it for so long, and you hear people talk about it being one of the very best, and you're worried that it's, especially after 3 years of having it in your collection but not having watched it, you're kind of worried that it's not going to live up to expectations. But this one did for the most part. It's not a perfect movie. I do have a couple of nitpicks with it that I'll get to at the end, but it is one of the best horror anthologies that I've ever seen, and it's certainly I can safe to say that I have in my collection. So let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with the things that I liked. I well ranked my favorites of these five stories as well here at the end, from 5 to 1. So, but to start out, all five of these stories are really well done. You can tell that a lot of time and care was put into each one of them by both Stephen King in terms of writing them and um, George A. Romero by directing them. I mean, these guys you could tell really grew up on those horror comic books, those EC comic books, and they wanted to make sure that this movie brought that across. And you can just tell there's not a dud in the bunch here. There wasn't any laziness really. I mean, all five of these stories, whether you like all five of them or not, I mean, some of them are better than others depending on people's opinions, but they all are well crafted, well cared for, well put together, well written. So that's the first thing that stands out. Then you got to talk about the practical effects by Tom Savini. I mean, other than um, other than The Thing from 1982, John Carpenter's The Thing, this might be the best 80s movies with practical effects. I don't know. I'll have to do some more marinating over that, but this is definitely up there. I was really impressed by the effects, from the gore effects to the makeup effects. It just reiterates my belief that practical is the way to go for horror movies, especially as they come off way better. And this movie's just a stamp on that. The look of some of the scary creatures or zombies from the dead, skeletals from the dead, are awesome. The creature from the crate is very, very well done. Um, Something to tide you over, some sort of I don't know if they're not necessarily zombies, but reincarnated from the dead basically. Looks great. Everything just looks great in this movie. Everything from a practical effects and Tom Savini standpoint is really exceptional. So that really stands out. As well as the score and the music used in this movie, it really adds so much more to the fun and the tone of the overall stories of the movie. It has some great piano riffs and cues, musical cues at different times. I just loved it. I don't know who did the music and the score for this movie. I didn't see it in the Wikipedia, but just fantastic, fantastic. One of the best, certainly one of the best horror music scores for an anthology movie that I've ever seen. And then you got to talk about the fact this movie has a terrific cast with a lot of well-known names that I mentioned earlier in the cast and performances that, by all those involved, are really good. It's not just a bunch of big names that don't give a good effort. They all do, and some of the performances are hokey, more hokey than others, especially Stephen King's. But again, you understand that given the tone and the kind of movie this was, they were meant to play it that way, and they all do an exceptional job. I think E.G. Marshall and Adrian Barbeau were the two standouts for me, in their separate segments. But it really everybody, Leslie Nielsen, Ted Danson, Hal Holbrook, they're all good. Fritz Weaver, who I like from the original Twilight Zone and some other horror show anthologies over the years. Everybody does a great job for what kind of movie they're in and what they're asked to do. So there's not a bad note anywhere. there are great comic book panels and transitions with really vibrant colors. It really makes for a more of a fun and visually appealing movie than it otherwise would be. Yeah, they really made sure to let you know that this was taken from the EC comic books, and the colors, the red and the blue specifically in those comic panels that they use, it's eye candy basically. So, um, what else do I have? So many pros. Has a great balance, I feel like, between the serious and the comedic tone that really just works overall. Some of the stories are a little bit more comedic, the Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, and some of them have a more serious tone, like Something to Tide You Over, and then some of them have a nice mixture of both, like The Crate or even Father's Day. So yeah, just a very good, a very well blended, well balanced tone setting kind of movie here. And I thought the comedic parts of it really worked well overall, which is not an easy thing to do in a horror movie. As I mentioned in some of my past reviews for like horror comedies and stuff like that, it's a very difficult thing. But the humor really hit here for me, and I think King's writing is a large reason for that. And then finally, it's this is a highly rewatchable movie. I mean, I can see, and I've heard from other people that the more you watch this, the more you like it. It doesn't lose anything, and that's the highest compliment you can really give to any movie, I think. And there's really no nudity or not even a lot of gore in the movie. It doesn't really count on that stuff. It's really about the makeup and practical effects used throughout, the performances, the stories, the writing, and the directing. There is some gore. I'm not going to say it's a goreless movie, but it's highly rewatchable overall, just from a fun '80s anthology standpoint. So those are my pros from the original Creepshow from 1982. As far as cons go, and these are very nitpicky, and one of them that I'm going to mention is not really a con; it's just more of a personal preference. But I was a little disappointed in the wraparound. I was expecting more from it. I guess I was expecting them to, between all five stories, to go back to the wraparound a little bit and build up some more depth with these characters, Tom Atkins characters, and the character of the kid played the young boy played by Billy Hopkins, was actually played by Joe King, I believe, Stephen King's son. It's really you only get him at the beginning before the five stories, and then at the end after the five stories. And I thought it'd be a little bit more intermingled there. As someone that's a fan of anthologies, especially those wraparound connecting tissue stories, I was expecting a little bit more there. Now it doesn't kill the movie. I still really like the wraparound. I think it's very good, especially the fact that this is based on a comic book, a horror comic book series. But I just wanted a little bit more than I was expecting. A little bit more. I thought it would have added more depth to those characters in the wraparound, basically, if they would have had some different scenes that cut in and out before and after the stories. Well, I think the pacing is good overall. I will say the crate segment, the fourth segment, did was the longest one, and there were some scenes that did seem to drag on a bit more than some of the others, like where they're trying to open the crate and taking their time with doing so. I thought they could have trimmed the fat a little bit on that one, but it's still a great story. Definitely not taking it. I mean, it didn't take me out of the movie or anything like that. It's just something that I noticed that some of the scenes in that particular segment ran a little shorter or a little longer, I should say, than they necessarily needed to. And then finally, this isn't really a con. Like I said, this is more of a personal preference, but it took me a minute to get into the comic book sort of style, anthology style, where it cuts away to like, you know, how it does sort of where it goes in and out of the cartoonish comic book. As far as a horror anthology goes, I'll be honest, it's not really my favorite thing, but they do it very well, and it didn't take me out of the movie as a result. For what it is, I thought they did a really good job with it, but it's just for me, this is a personal thing. For me, it's just not my favorite thing for a horror anthology. I like I like something that's a little bit more grounded in realism, and of course, this coming out of comic books, it's not going to be. I mean, it's more of a fun, a sort of fantical, if you want to say. That's just something I wanted to point out from my personal standpoint, but certainly not a con. As far as ranking, I'll go ahead and rank these five in my opinion. I thought that none of these are bad. Let me say that. Even my number five is easily rewatchable, but I would say my number five is going to be They're Creeping Up on You with the cockroaches, which was very well done, and they used all real cockroaches. I would say that's number five. I would say The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill was number four. Um, Father's Day number three, the first one. The Crate would be number two, and then I would say Something to Tide You Over with Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson. That was my favorite one in this entire movie. A little bit more of a serious tone, but not overly serious or scary at the same time. So this is fantastic, guys. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. I thought about giving it a 9.5, but the wraparound was a little bit disappointing to me. Just expecting a little bit more from it. But it's still almost a damn near a perfect movie. One of the best 80s horror movies that I've seen so far. So 9 out of 10 for the original Creepshow by George A. Romero and Stephen King from 1982. I'll also mention as I went into this, I'm not crazy about this setup, this DVD or the lack of special features. So I already have ordered the Screen Factory edition for Creepshow, which is already on its way. Actually, I should have it next week, so I'm probably going to sell this one. Um, like I said, I didn't really know what I had there, and even though I'm not giving this movie a 10 out of 10 in my review, it's still an exceptional movie that I'm very willing to upgrade for, which I don't do with all of my movies. If it's just a good movie or above average or below average, I'll keep whatever the simplest version of it is. But in this case, this is too good of a movie to have just this. I want the Screen Factory with all the special editions and just a better look in terms of artwork and everything overall. So that's just a blurb on that. But go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of the original Creepshow from 1982. What's your favorite stories? Rank them for me from your least favorite to your favorite. I'd be interested in hearing. Do you like this movie more than I do, as much or less? Please comment down below. Please like this video. Hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. And please be sure to subscribe to my channel as well so you don't miss any of my great horror content. Not only the rest of this series, but all the horror content I have throughout the rest of the year and into next year. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this review, and as always, stay scared. Bye.